The best way to predict the future is to create it. The simple line by Peter Drucker holds a great value. Creating a future is what entrepreneurs are good at. Wishing you all a pleasant evening. I am Durgesh Nandini and I will be your host for today's webinar. And on the behalf of DigiSaksham, let me send my hearty greetings to all of you for attending today. Thank you for being here. Let me introduce you to the organization first. DigiSaksham is an initiative of Sames Group that has developed content for over 300 courses in multiple languages, which range from 4 hours to 6 months in various sectors of IT, BFSI, retail, entrepreneurship for all age groups, from school children, youth, professionals, and senior citizens. DigiSaksham has also conducted more than 100 webinars, 10 FDPs, workshops, 6 international conferences. DigiSaksham has impacted more than 15,000 lives through various webinars, conferences, workshops, and seminars across the globe. Moving with the topic of today's webinar, Get Big or Go Home, Accelerating Speed of Growth. A young individual, when sets up a business of his own and decides to take on financial risk with a lot of hope and dreams in his eyes, there begins his journey as an entrepreneur. Now, it might sound as easy as putting your idea, money, and thoughts together to build up a business. There goes a lot of sweat, blood, and tears, which we as common individuals fail to acknowledge. A business is always vulnerable to various risk factors. To further talk about this and provide us with his innovative ideas and thoughts on this topic, we have Mr. J. Allen, sir. And we welcome you, sir, with a warm welcome today in this webinar. Mr. Allen is 2 times Global Entrepreneur Big Impact to Business Award winner. Apart from this, he has also won a few other awards too in the field of innovation and entrepreneurship. He is a business scale and exit mentor, helping business leaders move from survive to thrive using his proven Adda Zero scale method. A very warm welcome to you, sir. You may start now. We are delighted to have you on board.
Delighted to be here. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to being able to share with you Get Big or Go Home, and perhaps some challenging ideas with regards to where we need to focus our attention in order to be able to be relevant as an entrepreneur in the next decade or so. So without further ado, I hope all of you can see my screen as we kick off with today's webinar, Get and welcomes to Get Big or Go Home. I'm hoping that the video did play effectively and was able to be able to at least set the tone of what there is to come, because I firmly believe that there is a significant difference between that of being a business owner and that of being an entrepreneur. And don't get me wrong, I think there's enough space and room in this environment for this to be equal measure of both. Certainly some of the most successful people on the planet, when you ask them about whether they're a business owner or an entrepreneur, they will happily admit to being a business owner and wouldn't think about becoming an entrepreneur. And yet there are others who are far more entrepreneurial that would almost phase away and step away from the thought of ever being considered that of a business owner. And I think there's a significant divide between the two. And the first thing is for you to determine as to which one that you are and which one that you want to proceed in. Trust me, when I first set up my first business, and I'll come to that in a second or two, I'm now on my fourth business. When I first set up my first business, I was very significantly that of a business owner. I was very proud to own my own business. I'm very proud to be able to grow it significantly. But it wasn't until later on, probably at the sale of my first business, we successfully sold the business for a little over £1.7 million, 5 years after I'd set the business up, that I determined that perhaps the next time round I was going to become more entrepreneurial, and I've probably swapped seats from that of being a traditional business owner to that of being an entrepreneur. So without further ado, let's step into what I believe is what's necessary, certainly in the here and now, in a post-COVID culture, moving forward into the next generation. 80% of business owners are wrong about everything. And don't get me wrong, I think that that's a good statistic. Now, before we go into what do you mean that they're wrong about everything? How on earth could you possibly say that? None of the statistics that I share you today are on my own. All of this is based on research at a local, regional, national, and international level, taken from places like Dent and Gallup, Inc., to name but a few, to be able to look at what's happening in the world of work right now and how is it relevant to each and every one of you. So without further ado, let's kick off and find out as to where this 80% statistic has come from and why I think that that's actually a good idea. Well, first of all, in every sector, in every industry across the world, there are 1% of businesses in that sector, in that industry, that are doing incredibly well. They are leading the way. They are the ones that everyone else aspires to be. You've only got to think that in my working lifetime, two guys called Steve set up in one of the father's garages, who went on to become the biggest and most affluent digital technology company in the world. Of course, I'm talking about Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs. In the last 30 years, have gone from two guys finishing university and setting up in a basement to owning the world of technology, as is Apple's today. There are 1% of business owners in every sector, in every industry the world over, who are leading the way. And you've only got to think about the sector of business that you're in or wish to be able to move into, and then determine who are the global players, who are the ones that are leading the way, who are the ones that we've got to keep our eyes on to determine as to what they're doing next. They're the innovators within society. And there's a further 4% of businesses that are quickly on the heels of that elusive 1% club. There's another 4% of businesses in every sector, in every industry, that are doing really, really well and at risk of challenging that 1% leaders club. And again, we need to keep an eye on those because they're the early adopters of technology and of the way forward in business. But typically there are about 15%, varying by 1 or 2% tops, but there's about 15% of businesses in every sector, in every industry the world over, that are doing more traditional growth patterns, that are seeing a little bit of growth and then a plateau and a bit more of growth and maybe 4, 5, 6% per annum, but nothing really exciting and leading the way forward. However, 60% of businesses in every sector, in every industry, are relatively stagnant, aren't making that much progress, are rather trying to hope that there's enough money left at the end of the month and praying that there's not too much month left at the end of the money. 60% of businesses are stagnant, aren't really moving in any one direction whatsoever. And a further 20% fail and close the doors, just can't do it any longer, and they haven't got either the strength or the motivation or the understanding of what's to do. Now, if you look at these last two statistics, 60% are struggling and 20% are failing. I never sat out in business to be able to either struggle or fail, and yet 80% of the people on the high street, 80% of the people that are my competitors are already at a disadvantage. 4 out of 5 business owners aren't doing that well. And the reason why I think this is great news is that there is so much in business, particularly when we start out in business, that we look at our local competition and we see them as a risk. We see them as the competition. They've got a website. We're going to have a website. They've started a blog. We're going to have to start blogging. They've got a podcast. How on earth do you do a podcast? We look to the competition and believe that we have to try and compete with them in the hope that we can try and keep up. And the simple fact is, 4 out of 5 of them are getting it wrong. So my first lesson for today, in the many that I want to share with you over this webinar, is do not look to the competition and then try and compete with them. Understand that the best way to create your future is to create it yourself, to almost step away from the competitions, to say, what are all they doing? We're going to do something different. And again, I'll come back to that in a second or two. But 80% of business owners are getting it wrong. And I think that's a really good statistic, because it tells me that I shouldn't be following other people. I should simply be setting out on my own and doing what I believe to be the right thing, rather than trying to challenge the status quo that's being delivered everywhere else in business. And you see, the problem is the fact that so many people start out in business. Certainly in the UK, we see about 600,000 new businesses started every year. And certainly across the world, we're going to see millions of new businesses started every single year, predominantly over the last 2 years, where we've seen traditional business really struggle because of COVID and lockdown. We've seen a huge surge in the amount of new people setting up on business themselves. And yet so few people are ever taught the rules of how to play in business. We know the game Monopoly the world over, where you roll a dice and you take your character around the board and then you collect $200 as you pass go. The simple fact is that so many people have learned to play the game of business, but no one's been taught how to win in the game of business. So today I want to share with you an alternative thinking about how to win in the game of business. If you recall, a few minutes ago, I shared the fact that this is my 4th business. In the last 17 years, I've either bought or acquired or set up 4 of my own businesses, grown them and scaled them, and then successfully exited, taking out a significant lump sum to be able to say thank you for all the efforts. And then I've not necessarily got bored, but I've wanted to do it again and again and again. And I'm now on my 4th iteration of business, and I'm going to sell this as a going concern in about 7 years' time. I understand how to play the game because I know how to win. And therefore, I'm happy to play the game, knowing what the outcome is and when I want to achieve it. And that's what I want to talk to you about over the next few minutes or so. So first of all, I want you to understand that, yes, those 1% of businesses in every sector, in every industry, the Apples of this world, the Disneys of this world, to an extent, Microsoft and various other businesses, they are leading the way. And there's lots we could learn from looking at what they're doing and deciding as to how can I learn how to do that as well. However, the problem with doing that is you're now in competition with one of the biggest technology companies in the world. If I say, well, Apple's doing this, and so I'm going to try and adopt it into my business, well, Apple are doing it and doing it relatively well. So unless you've built an audience of people that know, like, and trust you, the simple fact is that you're competing against someone that's already got a brand and well known and understood, that you become almost second best. And the only thing therefore you can compete on is price. And anyone knows anything about business, that's a terrible method or a strategy to apply longer term to a business. You might compete on price when you first launch a business, but a long-term strategy determines that you're going to end up working lot longer for less and less return. So rather than looking at successful businesses, I chose to look at failed businesses. Now, you might be rather surprised to understand as to why anyone would spend any time or effort looking at a business that failed. And the simple fact is, you will always learn so much more from failure than you ever will from success. That's so important. I want you to write that down. You will always learn more from failure than you will from success. Why? Because when we're being successful, we are on such a roller coaster. Everything's going really well. Life seems to be a breeze. We're running at 100 miles an hour. We don't stop to wonder why we're successful. We just enjoy the success. It's only when we're not being successful, it's only when problems face us that we are given the opportunities to say, why are we not being successful? Not, oh, that was a mistake. Let's move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. The smart business owner identifies, well, if other people have been successful and I haven't been, what can I learn from that the next time I apply this, I become more successful? And again, I didn't learn this from a theory book. I didn't learn this from college or university. I learned this from making a mistake. In 2008, I ran a small business here in the UK. I employed 17 members of staff. We just signed a huge big contract to be national suppliers to one of the largest high street stores here in the UK called Woolworths. At the time, Woolworths were in their 93rd year of business. They employed 37,000 people across the UK. Their turnover was about £4 billion a year. And we just signed a contract to be suppliers to them. It had taken me employing 7 new members of staff and then training them up and preparing them, buying them equipment to be able to go in and deliver the job. And it was going to allow us to be able to double, almost triple our turnover in the next 12 months. However, on the 28th of November in 2008, just 56 days after we'd signed a 2-year contract, I received a phone call at about 6 o'clock on a Friday evening from a company called Deloitte to advise that Woolworths had gone into receivership and were no longer trading. And I lost £224,000 in about 6 minutes over a phone call. All of the invoices that we'd submitted to Woolworths over the last 2 months, plus the 3 or 4 months I'd spent on recruiting and training and equipping 7 new people ready to be able to honour the contract, and I lost everything in a 6-minute phone call. Not only did I lose about £250,000, I also had to lose 7 members of staff that I'd recently taken on. I ended up having to make them redundant because there was no work for them and there was no money in the bank to be able to see them through either. And I've got to tell you, that was the most painful thing I've ever been through. I never, ever want to have to recruit somebody and bring them into my business only at some stage in the future for me to make an error, for me to not see this happening, and subsequently for them to lose their lifestyle, to lose the career that they'd entrusted with me. And off the back of that, I made 2 promises. Now, first of all, I didn't want to just run away and hide, although that's what it felt like I was ready to do. So I dug deep. I borrowed some more money personally and invested back into my business. I remortgaged my house and I borrowed as much money as I could from the bank and from family and friends to be able to see our business through. And thankfully, I had the good knowledge to know how to play the game. And we turned around our business and I subsequently sold it 3 years later with 22 members of staff. We'd recovered well from it and with no debt whatsoever. But the key to this was, first of all, I needed to understand where did we go wrong and how do we overcome that. I spent time looking at why did we fail? How did we fail? How am I not going to fail again? How am I going to employ new people in a new business after I've sold this one and not make the same mistakes? Learning to be able to address failure is key to not continually failing. When you don't get the marks at school or at college or at university, rather than pushing it to one side and saying, well, it's too difficult, the job is to identify, where did you fail? Where were the weaknesses? How do I look into that? How do I become a better person? By addressing my weaknesses rather than just trying to play to my strength. So the first thing I did was spend time looking at how do I de-risk me and my business again, so I never, ever, ever have to lay anybody else off. I've made a promise from 2011, and I've stuck to it for the last 12 years, that when I recruit somebody, I provide them with a career and not just a job. I'm able to be able to confirm that when I take somebody on into my business now, I know that not only have they got the jobs to be able to do today, but the business is going to grow sufficiently that they'll be able to grow with me, and a starter or apprentice will move into a fully qualified member of staff, will become a team member or a team manager, and then a general manager, and subsequently an associate director. I've been able to map out the career of every single person that we take on in business and know that we have the capacity to be able to do so. But secondly, I wanted to understand what caused the failure of a business that was doing £4 billion turnover, employing 37,000 people, and had been in operation for 93 years. So I wrote to Deloitte and I submitted what's called a data access request, and I bought all the data that was used to close Woolworths for me to identify where did they go wrong. And what quickly occurred is that, first of all, I realized I was still too emotionally impacted by what it had done to me to really look at this data genuinely, pragmatically, without some emotional tie. But I'd been invited to be a lecturer at one of the leading universities on the MBA program here in the UK. And so I gave all the data to the students, to some business analysts, some really, really smart minds. And collectively, we started looking at what causes big businesses to fail. Now, just to quantify, a big business to me was a business that was doing more than 30 million turnover. It had employed more than 300 staff, and it had been operating nationally here in the UK for at least 5 years. They were our criteria to determine whether they were a good business to follow. And then we only started looking through data access requests at businesses that had grown and then collapsed quickly to find out what caused the collapse. And here is the key. I want to share with you something that I learned 2011, 2012 from this gentleman. This gentleman is called Warren Buffett. At the time that I heard him speak in 2012, he was the third richest man on the planet. He'd just launched his 174th new business, and we were in America to be able to support his launch, to learn from a man that I would consider one of the godfathers of modern entrepreneurship. And one of the things he said was this. Well, it would if it would come on the screen. There we go. Most people think small, whereas I automatically think big, and it gives me the advantage. So my challenge to each and every one of you, I very much welcome you to write this quote down because it's key to my business. We've got it printed on the wall here in the office. Most people think small, and they think about how do I feed me and my family in the next day or week or month. And Warren Buffett, the third richest man in the world at the time of saying this, said, and I think big, and it gives me the advantage. So I want to challenge each and every one of you today to start thinking bigger. And I'll show you how to do that before we finish today's webinar. So what did we identify? Well, we started looking at failure. We started to understand what causes failure so we can prevent us from failing. I'd sooner learn from somebody else's mistakes, and so I didn't have to make them myself. So over a 4-year period, whilst I was teaching the MBA program here in the UK, me and a group of second-year MBA students, some really, really smart minds in business analytics, started looking at the cause of big business failure. And today I want to share with you the three biggest failures that we found and how you can prevent falling into this trap. The first one is about having a plan. 47% of businesses that failed didn't have a direct, clear, understood plan. 47% of businesses that were employing tens of thousands of people that relied on the business owner knowing what to do, and they were driving blind. They weren't following a designated plan that says, this is where we are, this is where we're going to get to, this is how we're going to get there. I can't tell you the importance of having a plan in business, not just in business, but in life, for you to be able to determine where am I now, where have I come from, where do I want to get to? It's almost like trigonometry in school. You've got to have 3 points. Where have you started from? Where are you now? To be able to plot where are you going next. And yet the majority of businesses, almost 50% of businesses, are driving their business flat out down the motorway at 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, and they haven't got a sat nav. They don't know where they're going. They're just grinning on and hoping that this is leading in the right direction, and they're not going to hit a brick wall. So please, I urge you, both as an individual and as you move into the world of work, to be able to understand what is the plan? Where are we heading? What is my contribution? What is it going to give me in return? Being able to have clarity on where you are heading helps you understand as to what are the things I've got to do that help me get there. I'm an also firm believer, and I have sort of a saying called SOS, shiny object syndrome. The things that draw us off course, the little snippets of temptation that, oh, you should do this. Oh, you might try that. Oh, this has just started. Try over here. This is just, I did this. It was brilliant for me. We can constantly be barraged by other stuff that drives us just 1 or 2 degrees off course and never ever allows us to get back on it. Having clarity on where do you want to get to, and again, I'll come to this at the end, but having clarity on where you want to get to and then justifying every single step. Is what I'm doing right now, is attending this webinar right now contributing towards where I want to get to? And if it is, great. Keep your ears clear, have a pen to hand and write lots of notes. But if it's not, don't be here. If today isn't contributing to where you need to be, then you're wasting time. And trust me, as an older person these days, the one thing that none of us have more of is time. Doesn't matter how much money I've got in the bank, I can't buy back yesterday and the silly mistakes I made that stopped me from achieving what I set out to achieve. The most effective businesses are the ones that have got clarity on both the individual and where do you want to be as an individual and where does the business want to be and how do we pull the two together. 47% of businesses were driving blind. Let me quickly share a little bit more on that with you. So start with the end in mind. I've got 4 questions. I want you to write them down because I think they're really relevant and important. But the first one is, what does success means to you as an individual? You see, I can go to the Oxford English Dictionary and look up any word I want to, and it'll give me a definition. But trust me, over the last 17 years, I've asked the word, what does success means to you, to over 10, if not 15,000 different people. And I've heard 10 or 15,000 different definitions about what that word means to them. So I want you to spend some time, not necessarily now on the webinar, I've got loads more to share with you, but certainly over the next day or so, and to really define, ask yourself the question 1,000 times, what does the word success means to you and when do you want to achieve it by? I'll show you why that is important in a second on the next slide. Then we can move to the business of business, what it is that we're doing on a daily basis and what does success look like for the business. What does the word success mean? How will we know when we've achieved it? When do we want to achieve it by? What does the word success mean? And this should align with our plan, because there's the third question. Are the two aligned? Is what you are doing now contributing towards the business's success, and is what the business aiming to try and achieve aligned with your success? I've seen some of the biggest companies in the world where the business is doing exceptionally well and the managing director or the chief executive of the business is becoming more and more upset and frustrated and having doubts and mental health issues about the business that's doing so well. Why? Because the business is taking them further and further away from what they want to achieve in their life. It's taking them away from their family and their friends and their freedom and their time and availabilities to do all the things that they wanted to do when they became successful. So it's only once we've identified what does success mean in my life and then what does success mean in the business that I'm operating in and how are the two aligned? How do we know that the business success is contributing towards my success and vice versa? However, the big challenging question is the fourth one. What next? Once you've achieved success, or once the business has achieved its success, what happens next? You see, I'm a firm believer, and as a Christian and proud to be so, I'm a firm believer that we are all custodians of what's happening right now, of the business that we're in, of the success that we're contributing towards, the contribution that we make to society, and not the owner of it. You see, once I've created my success and my business has been successful, if I was the owner, I could just close it and say, do you know what? I've bought my yacht, I've bought my island, I've got my helicopter, I'm sorted. But that isn't ethical. What about all the people that have helped and contributed to getting you there? Whereas if we turn around and say we are custodian, I am responsible for getting it from A to B, but at B, when I step off because I've achieved my success, who's then responsible for taking the reins of the business, for stepping forward and going from B to C and to D and to E and to F and to making a bigger contribution across the rest of the world? So I believe, and something that came from a gentleman that I've read a lot on from the 1920s and 1930s, Napoleon Hill was one of the greatest researchers in the 1920s who worked alongside Carnegie to be able to understand what I consider the very fundamentals of modern entrepreneurship. And Napoleon Hill simply said, a goal is nothing but a dream until you give it a deadline. And therefore, when we talk about success, I want you to identify, when do you want to achieve this by? It's only when we've got a deadline of when we want to achieve it that all of our actions can contribute towards making that a reality. So what's flaw 2? And how did this impact businesses failing, and what can we learn from it? As you'll notice, the slide shows a triangle, a red triangle pointing down. Businesses that don't do well, businesses that struggle, even in good fluent times when everybody else is doing well, businesses that are struggling all the time are the ones that have people, system and processes in place, but they put the wrong emphasis on the wrong thing. They create a business where systems and processes are so rigid that it doesn't support people. In retrospect, businesses that do really, really well, and like you see, the triangle is now pointing uppermost, are the ones that still have people and system and processes, but understand the importance that people play in business. Now, trust me, you might think that I'm somewhat old-fashioned with regards to the fact that everything is technology driven these days. We've got artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've got all of this automation and bot technology. And I'm all for supporting automation and semi-automation. But we are in the humans to human business. Doesn't matter what business or sector you're in, doesn't matter whereabouts in the world you are, we are serving other human beings. And unless we can continue to be people-centric, what I mean by that is that we are doing things to support other human. And we have systems and processes that are there to support people to achieve what we set out to achieve. You see, businesses in the last 2 years, not just here in the UK, but or in India or everywhere across the world, businesses in the last 2 years have been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 crisis and the lockdowns that have been caused by the World Health Authority to try and mitigate the spread of the disease, of a pandemic. And yet, no business have been stress tested to determine, do our systems and processes support what happens when the business goes into lockdown, when the country goes into lockdown, when we can't move around anymore? How do people still do business? And where businesses have got systems and processes that are so rigid and haven't been tested in the environment, it switches people off. They simply stop doing what we need to be done, and the business implodes. Whereas a business that is people-centric, that puts employees and customers at the heart of everything that it does, it still has systems and processes, but they're there to support the people and the customers to do what's necessary. Then businesses fly. And I've seen more and more businesses do so well, not by selling hand sanitizer and masks, but by understanding what the customer needs and adapting who we are and what we do to be able to support their needs. There's a lovely quote from Michael Jordan, arguably one of the greatest basketball players of all time, who said, the greatest investment a business can ever make is in the recruitment, retention, and reward of its people. You've got to have the right team in place. You've got to be able to get the right people and to keep the right people and to recognize the right people if you want a business to succeed. We are in the human to human industry. And it doesn't matter whether you're a tech nerd or whether you're a tech phobic, we are in the humans to human industry. And I'll share more with you in a second or two about why that's so important. So the third flaw is what I call the holistic business, understanding how business works and how we contribute towards. Let me show you. Shared responsibility towards shared goal. What do I mean by that? Well, when a business first starts out, either from a back bedroom at home or with some venture capitalist investment, it doesn't matter what business they're in or what sector they're in or whereabouts in the world they are, there are three segments that a business needs. And if you're already working or planning to work in any of these, you will always have the opportunities to work regardless of lockdown or pandemic or whatever else happens in the world going forward. Marketing, sales, and operation. They are the fundamentals of every business. Now, again, just to be controversial and make you aware, marketing does not get you money. I'll say that again. Marketing's job is not to get you money, and therefore marketing should not be measured by the money in the bank at the end of the day. Marketing's job is to raise awareness of who you are and what you do and what you have to offer and who you're offering it to. Marketing's job is the PR of the organization. It's about spreading the message and having the world stage to understand who you are and what you offer. Marketing's job is to raise awareness. Sales's job is to take that awareness and convert it into money. Marketing and sales should be a hand in glove. Marketing to raise awareness and then sales to adapt that awareness into cash. But marketing's job is not money. Marketing's job is to raise awareness. Sales's job is to convert awareness into cash. And then the operational function, how do we service that payment? Whoever's bought something, be it a service or a product, or how do we give them back that so there's a fair transaction so the person comes and spends again and again and again. And they're the three fundamentals of any and every business. And yet the majority of businesses, the 20% of businesses that fail every year, fail to get these three things right. But 60% of businesses stay in business but struggle. They've moved to phase 2 of business. They understand the need to be able to manage finance and money and how to be able to do cash flow forecastings, to understand how to plot where the money comes from, how quickly it's being spent, where it's being spent, so we can make a cycle. And then eventually to be able to recruit more and more people into the business so the business has the capacity to serve more people, and as a result the team grows. So if you've got any plans to be able to, or already working in either finance or money or banking or in recruitment or retention or training, then these are phase 2 elements of a business. And again, there's going to be the need to be able to support about 60% of businesses struggle with these 2 areas. So if you're already working or aims to work in either of these 2 areas, world over, you're going to have great opportunity to be able to work effectively the world over as businesses recognize the needs to spend more time managing and perfecting their financial and team perspective. But there's a third element, and so few businesses ever operate in this area. Less than 15% of businesses move to phase 3, which is where the real growth and scale of a business comes from. And that is all about values and culture. It's all about having a strategy and a structure to be able to grow effectively. It's all about monitoring service and delivery to every customer at every opportunity to remain relevant. And less than 15% of businesses are operating in this area, which is why I believe that the next generation needs to be more aware of this and how to contribute towards these things as an outcome, because this is where businesses go from growth to scale. This is where businesses go from traditional growth patterns to accelerated growth patterns and take over the world. So if you've got any interest in being able to work in either a values or a culture-based business, to be able to help understand how to be able to shape and build the values of a business or the culture of a business, if you've got any ideas about strategies and structures and how to become disruptive in a very competitive marketplace, if you've got a real desire to be able to support the customer and customer-centric learning, then these are evolving businesses that are going to be in the next generation or so. So finally, we need to understand that all business is people outcome centric. We've got to understand that it's not about widgets. It's not about bots. It's not about machine learning and artificial intelligence. We are in a human to human industry. All of us, doesn't matter what sector of business or whereabouts in the world you are. It's about a humans to human engagement. I want you to write this down for me. 80% of business is done emotionally, and 20% is then justified mentally. 80% of decisions made in business are emotional decisions from one human to another, and we have to remain in a human to human, people outcome centric business. And when we do, magic. So there's a lovely quote from Bill Gates. Only when every individual sets aside personal ambition in pursuit of a shared goal can a team deliver excellence as the standard. Only when every individual sets aside any form of aspiration of personal ambition in pursuit of a shared outcome. We all contribute to the goals of the business, understanding that when the business achieves its goals, we achieve ours also. Can the team come together and deliver excellence, that 1% as a standard? So I want to share with you about these two characters. I'm hopeful that they are familiar the world over, but I grew up with this as a cartoon on my television as a young child and growing up. This is Tom and Jerry. Tom being the cat and Jerry being the mouse. But I bet when you watch this, or if you haven't seen it, then YouTube is there to be able to catch up on episode. But if you've never seen Tom and Jerry teaches us so much about what's really relevant in life right now. And I'd like to share with you that final story before I stop the presentation and be willing to take questions. Tom in the cartoon always chases Jerry. He's constantly running around trying to catch the cat to try and catch the mouse. But Jerry always avoids capture. He's always one step ahead of Tom, and he's usually laughing at him and pulling faces as Tom trips and falls and gets damaged and battered and bruised. And eventually, Tom just gives up. And he says, I'm not doing this anymore. I give in. And the moment Tom gives in, Jerry gets bored of not being chased and comes and sits by the side of Tom, and they share eating the cheese. And it's exactly the same in life. Tom represents the fat cat that continually chases Jerry, who represents money. And what I mean by this is, if all of your attitude, if all of your energy, if all of your being and your desire is to just chase money, then trust me, some of the richest people in the world have some of the biggest mental health problems in the world. We've seen some of the richest people in the world talk about being suicidal. How on earth is that possible? They've got all of the wealth because wealth isn't the solution. If all you do is chase money, money will always evade capture. It'll always be one step ahead of you. And it doesn't matter how much money you've got right now, you always want more. The fat cat is never satisfied. However, when you give up chasing money, when it ceases to be the emphasis of what we're doing and why we're doing it, when we give up on chasing money and replace it with impact, replace it with understanding that these are the 17 global goals to save humanity. These are the 17 biggest risks to humans living on this planet, identified by the United Nations, and a commitment to 2040 to try and address all of these 17 issues. Now, when they first identified these in 2015, it was established that it was going to cost $716 trillion to address all of these issues. That's more money than there is on the planet. But no one turned around and said, that's too tough, we're not going to start. All countries, 216 countries so far, have signed up to be able to say, how do we contribute to this as an outcome? They've set such a huge goal and a time frame. Remember, a goal is but a dream without a deadline. 2040 is the deadline, that these things have to be under control for all of us to be safe to live on this planet. So my quest to each and every one of you watching this webinar, either live today or as a replay, don't set your stall out by determining what success is to you. Don't set about to say, how much money can I make and what can I do with it for me and my family? Change the record. Look at these 17 issues and say, how can I contribute either individually or collectively as a body of people, or as a team, or as a college or a university, or as a place of work, or as a country, how can I make a contribution to one, if not all, of these 17 global problems? Because remember what I said, that when Tom stops chasing Jerry, Jerry gets bored and comes and finds him. And in 2018, we adopted these 17 goals into our coaching consultancy practice. And we said for every single day, while we do work in business, we are going to make an active contribution to these 17 issues. We stopped chasing money and we started to chase impact. How can we make a bigger impact on these things? And my business has tripled in the last 3 years. The money has started to come towards us at a far, far, far greater rate since we stopped chasing it. The more impact we have on the world, the reason that I've volunteered to be able to offer my services on a Sunday in the UK to be able to support a webinar, is that we are making a contributions to these 17 issues by sharing them with the world. And by doing so, more money will come to our business as a result of the bigger impact that we have. So as I close today, and I'm willing to be able to take questions, I'm going to switch the presentation off in a second and we'll go back to sharing face-to-face. I just want to briefly share with you that about a year ago, I wrote a book called How to Add a Zero, the ultimate guide to sustainable scale. It is available on Amazon. It's available through Audible. It's available as a PDF or as a Kindle, or however you want to be able to make use of it. But within the book, we share how to be able to set our sights on a far, far, far greater goal than cash in the bank, and how to align all of our thoughts, efforts, energies, deeds, exercise towards being able to have the biggest impact. And as a result of which, it allows us to be able to make a bigger impact on our own journey, our own success, and in our own personal income. The goal is to be able to add a zero to the universe, and by doing so we can make an impact on the universe. I'm going to stop the presentation there, and I'm happy to be able to take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. This was a very powerful and impactful session. Okay, so we do have our first question by Wilbert. Does it imply that success means make impact?
Great question. And yes, I believe that whilst there are many, many, many definitions of the word success, and I'm sure that if you've ever been asked it yourself, how do you succeed in playing the flute? How do you succeed in riding a bicycle? How do you succeed in learning to swim? There are a whole host of other measures in which we can consider what does success means to us as an individual. I personally believe that the biggest success is the impact we make on either ourselves or our community or our country or the world at large. And if we want to be able to become more wealthy, the bigger the impact we can have on more and more people, the more response we get, and therefore the more successful we become. If we learn to give more, we will receive more. But we have to be willing to give in order to receive.
Okay. Now, Paris asked, how can you make business more productive to others?
Great question. How can you make business more productive to others? Well, the big problem at the moment is the fact that we perceive that business is about income. Business has always been generated around being able to generate enough profits for the business to continue and to move on. And the traditional model of business probably came to an end about 30 years ago with the introduction of the World Wide Web and the access to being able to communicate and trade globally. Certainly, I presume that the majority of people on this webinar have born and grown up with the internet. But my first career, I spent all of my education and my first 10 years in business before the internet even existed. There was no such thing as the World Wide Web. And yet the business model that we still see being operated of a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, trying to create a product and then sell it for a profit. The business model changed about 25 years ago with the opportunities to be able to trade globally. Some of the biggest businesses that started in the last decade started in a back bedroom by a 12 or 13-year-old child with a good idea that have subsequently become global. We can all now compete on a global playing field, and we can compete against the likes of Amazon and Microsoft and Airbnb and Uber. There is there is so much more opportunity for us to be able to do business if we break the rules of business and we stop thinking of business as a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, or of a local geography of how does I support my local community, and understand that we all have the capacity to compete on a global playing field. We're going to see more people employed from one end of the country, at one end of the world, working for a business on the other side of the world, using things like Zoom and Teams to be able to communicate, that there is a skill shortage right now that we could all contribute towards. And we've got to be able to understand that the world is your playing field. Your CV, your curriculum vitae, your contribution can be received globally rather than automatically thinking, well, how far am I willing to travel to go to work?
Thank you, sir. The next question is from J. True. How do you keep your feelings separate from decision making?
Great question. And the chances are you probably don't. I would say probably the 1% of businesses in every sector, in every industry that are at the forefront are the ones that have the greatest. I don't even believe that they are able to keep emotion separate, but I think they're probably the best ones at being able to trying to manage their emotions and understand that in actual fact it's just business. But the simple fact is that it's a humans to human let me answer this a different way. The chances are that we might have all heard the old expression, people buy from people. And throughout all of this, I've been talking about being customer centric, about being understand the problem that is being faced and how do we contribute towards the outcome. And yet, if we've only listened to that bit of a saying that people buy people, in actual fact, we've missed out on half of the phrase. The real phrase, or when it was first quoted, comes from Henry Ford in the 1920s when he said, people buy passion from passionate people. People buy an emotion and then we justify it with our head. 80% of business is emotional decision making. So we can't extract emotion from business. If we become emotionless, we become irrelevant. What we have to learn to do is how to channel emotion to the best outcome. The best outcome for you, the best outcome for the person, the best outcome for the universe. It's being able to understand that we are all human, therefore we are all full of emotion, and it's how to utilize emotions to be effective that makes business so much more exciting.
Next question is from Jack Lynn, and he asks you, what are the successful business pivots that you have seen your clients achieve?
Cool, these are great questions. I'm loving this today. Thank you. For me, it's not about being industry or sector specific. There's two things that we have to have in equal measure to be successful. The first thing is to understand who do you serve. So many people start out in business, and when I say, who is your ideal target client, they tell me, well, I could sell this to anyone. Well, do you know what? I'm nearly 50 years old, and for the last 49 and a half years, I've never wanted to be associated with anyone. I've never wanted to be one of a crowd. Anyone could buy this. Well, do you know what? Whenever you have that attitude, no one will buy it, because no one's an anyone. So identifying who do you want to buy this this product or service, who is not just clients, who could buy this, that's not the question. The question is, who is your ideal target client audience? And the more you know about them, the second point is the more you can remain relevant. So put the two together. First of all, you've got to know who is the ideal target client audience, not who could buy this, who do you want to buy this? It was Google Garage about 3 years ago that predicted that if you can identify a niche down, super niche, if you can narrow down to your ideal target client audience being no larger than about 50 to 80,000 people the world over, that is when you'll make the biggest impact and the most money. And yet so many people try and sell their product or service to the masses, and therefore they compete with everybody else. So first of all, it's knowing who is the ideal target client. If you can narrow it down to one in a room full of people, and then understand that the world over, there's 50 or 60,000 other people in a room just like that. So spend some time really understanding not just the demographics or the geographics, but the psychographics and the heuristics of identifying your avatar, your ideal target client audience. And once you've done that, stay relevant. Know what they need right now and provide it to them. Be willing to be flexible, be willing to be able to change who you are and what you do to remain relevant to that ideal target audience. And if you can do both of those things in equal measure, you'll be a millionaire before you're 30.
Okay, so we do have the session going live on YouTube too. So we do have some questions from there also. In essence, to succeed, one must change his mindset away from money, right? So thinking about impacts lead to proper planning on how to raise money to follow the goals. Should I read it again?
No, this is a great question. It's a double-sided question. And yes, I don't want you to think that you've got to give up on all aspects of money in order to be able to pursue impact, because otherwise we could quickly run out of money whilst we try and make a bigger impact. So money has its place. We've got to be sustainable. If you remember, I said phase one of a business is marketing, sales, and operation. We've got to be able to tell people who we are. We've got to be able to sell that promise, that offer of a solution, and we've got to be able to fulfill that profitably in order that we can continue to do it again and again and again. That's phase one elements. That's almost the elementary level of doing business. How do we able to remain relevant? The second element is all about being able to understand that we've got to manage our money. We've got to be able to plan and prepare for what's coming next. We've got to be able to have a cash flow forecast. We've got to be able to predict what's happening. We've got to be able to have some measures in place, usually monthly management accounts, to understand as to what to do, when to do, how to do. And we start to build a team around, so it's not just us that's doing it. We're enticing other people to be able to come on board and work with us. And then in the third stage, once we move from a successful business to a scalable business, it's all about strategy and structure and vision and values. And that's when we start to be able to embody impact at the vision and value stage, the third level of business, when we can start to have a bigger impact on more people. And as a result, we start to find that marketing becomes easier. It's a better message, because instead of trying to market and sell stuff, we're simply marketing to say, this is what we're doing right now, and would you like to be party to it? There's a great example, perhaps. There's a pharmaceutical company in Canada, and the majority of their wealth, the majority of their business is to produce insulin to be able to help people with diabetes the world over. Certainly in Canada, about 96% of all insulin comes from this one manufacturer. And then across the hemisphere, across that continent, about 56% of all insulin is generated by that company. They've made it their mission that all of their investment is going into being able to cure diabetes. Now, think about this for a second. Their main product is insulin, and which is used to be able to support people with diabetes, and yet their mission is to eradicate diabetes globally. Now, if you think about it logically, their mission is to be able to do themselves out of business. But ironically, the company has quadrupled in turnover in the last 3 years since they made trying to be able to eradicate diabetes as their mission. So many other companies the world over have now said, well, if you're trying to work towards a cure for diabetes, I'm happy to pay money into buying your insulin until we find a cure. They've understood that vision and values, the culture of the business, is determined by the impact they have on the globe, and they can continue to make a lot of money in the interim whilst they support the overall outcome. And ironically, as they start to near towards the end, when we realize that we found a cure for diabetes and we don't need insulin anymore, there's a good chance that they've already identified what they're going to do next to remain relevant to a global audience.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Mr. Jechu, as a personal question to you, what values are you committed to, sir?
Let's get personal. What values am I committed to? Well, I'm going to take a little bit of credit, but initially I want to be able to mention somebody else with whom I've held in high esteem for a few years now, called Daniel Priestley. Daniel Priestley started off as a business analyst some many years ago. He now runs a company in the UK and America and Canada called Dent, or How to Make a Dent in the Universe. and he specializes in looking at data to look for trends. And he said a number of years ago, I've known Daniel as a friend for probably the last decade or so now, and we've spoken on each other's stage, on each other's webinars and the likes. He's an author of a book, I'm an author of a book. We're relatively well known to each other. And Daniel said in 2018 that we've come to the end of a long trend. He said trends happen in three different periods. We have micro trends that happen in the moment. We have trends that tends to happen seasonally. And then we have mass trends that tends to happen over generation. And we've come to the end of a mass trend. And he said that mass trend seems to have been lies and deceit. We seem to have seen so many businesses that have overpromised and underdelivered in the last decade or so, where they've made some very verbose premise about what they're capable of doing, and then they've actually delivered far less than that. And people have become wise to it. People have become so fed up with being lied and cheated and stolen from. We've seen too many people that have had adverts on the internet where we've paid $29 for this or $49 for that, and nothing's happened. There's been this smoke and mirrors of pretend. And we've come to the end of an era, and we're moving into another era, a new era, a mass era, an era that's going to last at least the next generation of transparency and honesty and vulnerability. So when it comes to my own values, thankfully, I'm very proud, like I said, mentioned earlier, I don't thrust it upon people that I'm a Christian, but I'm very proud to have been an active Christian all of my life, and I believe in Christian values. But as a business, we've committed to ethics, transparency and vulnerability. We're willing to be able to admit to people when we get it wrong, and what we're doing to learn from that to be able to move on into the next generation. How do we pass that on into other people's lives so they don't make the same mistakes that we've made in the past? So for me, it's all about being open and honest and transparent, and understanding that that in itself is a currency compared to the last generation, where so many people have been lied and cheated, that in actual fact, being open and honest is actually the way forward and the only way to operate. So we were very proud about 4 years ago in the UK to have been recognised by the state in London, being awarded the ethical coaching company. You know, my business is called My True North, the ethical coaching company. That never came from some PR lab or a marketing agency. We were awarded that. There's a little just here, sits on my desk, but we were awarded this wonderful, beautiful piece of glass in 2017 from one of the largest private equity firms in the UK, and recognised for not just practicing ethics in business, but teaching ethics to business about the way in which we can operate on a far, far better level than trying to rob people of all of their wealth. Being able to understand that it's all about impact and that money comes to those who wait.
So further he asked, what are your current goals?
Thank you. So I launched my book. There's a copy of it just there if people haven't already seen it on the screen. If you reminder, I launched Add a Zero. And what we've identified is that if we can help small businesses to grow and to thrive, then to do so needs to take on a team. They need to be able to move away from being the business owner and move into being the business operator, the one that they're doing all of the doing, and become a business owner that employs a team of people to be able to grow and expand. So we've made it our mission to be able to support 1 million small business owners to grow by a minimum of generating 3 new places within that place of work. I want to be able to help all small business owners take on at least 3 new members of people into their business to create 3 new roles within their business by the speed and significance of what they're doing. Because if we could do that globally, and we could support 1 million people in each country to be able to grow their small business and employ a minimum of 3 new people as a result, then collectively we can eradicate unemployment the world over by generating more new jobs than there are those people who are actively seeking employment. And our mission is to rid the world of unemployment by creating new vacancies and new opportunities.
Yes, on that note, the next question is from Wilbert. Sir Jay, would you consider yourself successful now?
Oh, this comes back to that definition of success, doesn't it? And you see, for every time that we achieve success, we move the goalpost as to what success is. So In terms of financial success, then yes, I could consider that I'm happy to share that we've generated enough income that I don't need to work anymore. I do this as a matter of choice as opposed to of necessity. I've got an income generator within the business that takes care of all of my family's financial needs, that I do this through choice. So on many people's question of, are you successful? When one could argue that financially, yes, I am. On the other, I've changed the goalpost. My first mission was to be able to create a business that was capable of being able to support me and my family. My second mission was then to be able to extend that to being able to offer that opportunities to a wider team and to be able to take on more people into the business and create success in them and their lives also. And then once we'd achieved that within the small team that we now employ, we went about this big mission. I signed up and was being coached by Tony Robbins in 2020, 2021, throughout lockdown and COVID. I chose to invest in being coached directly by Tony and his senior leadership team at UPW. And it was through working directly with Tony that he said, well, if the mission's as good as it says it is, and you can help be able to small business owners to be able to extend, why are you only doing that in the UK? Why haven't you gone global? And it was through being challenged to even think bigger, to get big or go home myself, that we set about this new mission that said, well, if we can deliver this content and we can help and support people in their own native country to be able to understand that by thinking differently and doing differently, we can have a completely different outcome, then collectively we could eradicate unemployment. And that's the mission that I'm currently on. And until we've achieved it, hopefully in the next 7 or 8 years, the goal is to be able to have done it by July 2028. Then we can help eradicate unemployment. And until then, I won't consider this mission a success. But once it is, I'll change the goalpost and I'll create a new mission and another set of success goals.
Okay, so the last question is, what advice would you give to newbie entrepreneurs or to those people wanting to enter business? This is from Jaytru.
Delighted. Thank you very much for being given the opportunity, for one, sharing this webinar with people, but also to being able to answer these questions. What advice would I give to people starting out as an entrepreneur or those starting their entrepreneurial journey? Well, if there was one thing that I would hope I would have been taught a long, long time ago when I first started my own journey, thankfully I've learned it along the way, but if there was one thing I was going to pass to anybody else, it would be 2 quick pieces of advice. The first of all, create your own goal. Don't spend any time contributing towards somebody else's goal unless it's aligned with your own. Have a goal that you want to work towards, that you measure your success for. Have a goal and then start to communicate that with everybody, not just the people in your family or your friends or the people that you anticipate are going to support it, but communicate it every single day. Have it written on a wall, have it on your phone, have it on your computer, see it and believe it, to work towards it every day. Start to question yourself to say, am I doing what's right to contribute towards that as an outcome? Create crystal clear goal that you're working towards and then work every day towards it. That would be the first piece of advice. And the second would be, in the UK, we have coins and then we have notes as denominations of currency, and the £2 coin has an engraving all the way around the circumference of a £2 coin. I keep a £2 coin. I consider it my lucky £2 coin. It's in my wallet at any one time. And if I was to read the engraving that goes all the way around the end, it says, standing on the shoulder of giants. So my second piece of advice, and something I wish I'd been taught far, far younger, was there are people out there who've already done the things that you're struggling with right now. So find who you need to be inspired by and don't ever put them on a pedestal and look up to them, because trust me, they will always fall short of being a god, a mecca, or something that you should base your life around. Instead, look into them, find out what it is about them that you are so inspired by, and then replicate that within yourself, that others start to see the same in you. Pick 5 people with whom you want to be inspired by, look into what it is that inspires you about them, and then become a replication, become a combination of those 5 people. Align it with the goals that you want to achieve, and don't let anybody at any stage in life tell you anything other than you're capable of anything you set your mind to. In the meantime, I just wanted to offer my sincerest of thanks for this opportunity. I hope that you found that Get Big or Go Home was significantly challenging enough, perhaps with regards to some of the thoughts and ideas. And just to understand that all of this is based on research that we've conducted over the last 7 years of more than 150 national businesses and over 100,000 SME businesses with whom we've had contact and communication with to establish as to why we say the things that we do. And it's based on that research and implementing the things that we've seen and done over the last 7 or 8 years that have seen more than 8,000 businesses that we've worked with accelerate the speed of growth and the significance of impact to be awarded with things from the Queen and the Palace, from national awards and international awards for impacts that they've had on their community or their profession as a direct result of changing the way in which we do business, from following everybody else to setting course and doing it yourself.
Thank you so much, sir. This was indeed a very powerful session for me personally, and I think the audience enjoyed a lot. And with this, we come towards the end of the webinar. And I would again thank you, our speaker, Mr. Allen. It was truly an informative session. I hope the participants got a lot of valuable insights about a business, how a business grows, and the success follows. Thank you for inspiring us to think big. Also, thank you to our lovely audience who took some time out of their busy schedule and made their presence today. We are grateful and we hope this session proves to be helpful as well as inspiring to you guys, and you may conquer into your entrepreneur ideas and dreams. Do follow us on our social media links, which will be provided in the chat box, and do tag us on Instagram with your hashtags DigiSaksham when you receive your e-certificates. And thank you so much, sir. Again, it was a very good session, and I hope as much as we enjoyed, you have enjoyed yourself too.
Yes, it's been absolutely superb. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you so much.